We are delighted to welcome Chris Van Duijn, partner at Office for Metropolitan Architecture OMA and head of OMA's Asia practice for his public lecture at Seoul National University Department of Architecture and Architectural Engineering. Chris holds a Master of Architecture from the Delft University of Technology, joined OMA in 1996 and became a partner in 2014. Over the past decades, he has led major projects from the CCTV headquarters in Beijing to Access Springer campus in Berlin, bringing a signature brand of the architecture, innovation, and urban thinking. In his role overseeing OMA's Asia operations, Chris is developing a broad portfolio of work across Asia, spanning master planning, mixed-use development, and educational campus that foreground context, culture, and dynamism. A highlight of his work is the winning design for new campus of the Hongik University in Seoul, announced last year, 2 years ago. His approach there reimagines the campus as a landscape of the possibilities rather than a collection of the standalone buildings. Positioned partially below ground, the new campus uses green rooftop to create continuous pedestrian connections between the university and the vigorous surrounding Hongdae neighborhood, essentially extending the topography of the adjacent Wow Mountain into the campus rim. We look forward to his insight into how architecture can negotiate between the urban and natural context, institution ambition, and neighborhood life as we reflect on new trajectories and the possibility for design here in Seoul through the lens of Chris Van Duijn's work. So please welcome him, and we will have the lecture.
Yeah, thank you for the introduction. My name is Chris. I leave the last name out. And I'm happy to present to you today some of our work. I have prepared a selection of projects that we've been working on over the past years. And it will mainly focus on the relation between architecture and city, about, let's say, the context of projects in a sometimes very broad sense and sometimes in a kind of very literal way. Yeah, OMA as a company, you may have heard about us. We exist since 50 years. We work from 3 offices, New York, Rotterdam, and in Hong Kong. So we work, let's say, according to region, but we also work according to typology or client, sometimes globally. So I'm working with the Hong Kong office throughout Asia, but some of my fellow partners also do projects here when they, for instance, follow a specific client or a specific type of job. Anyway, we do architecture, large scale, commercial, cultural, residential, small scale. But architecture is very slow. Architecture is very static. And a lot of the work is not really built, but that's the work that we sometimes do before we do architecture, and sometimes also not related to architecture per se. And that's why we use also this label AMO. I mean, we're the same company. We're mainly the same people. But there's the type of work that is not expressed in concrete and steel and glass. Projects that can end up as publications, as exhibitions, energy projects, fashion shows, temporary installations. So, and that's an expansion of our work as architects. So it's still the same way of analyzing, thinking, conceptualizing, but it helps us to sometimes zoom out and sometimes also to just work in a different cycle. And I think everybody in our office is working on different types of projects, so it keeps everybody also fit. let's say. So now Korea. I think we made this collage just to also show, like, we have been working in Korea since 25 years, more or less. The first projects were in the late 90s. Those were master planning projects. But the first project that got built was the Lium project, but of course also next door almost the art museum on this campus. And recently we have been doing also a lot of new projects throughout Korea. So it's no longer only Seoul, but we're also working on different places throughout Korea. I will present a few of them later today. Now, this is an image which I particularly like, because if you Google Korean city, this is what you get on Google. This was my first image, so I said, okay, stop. This is for me enough. This says it all. This is, according to Google, a Korean city. And you may like it or you may not like it, but I think it says a lot. And I think that's also why I do this lecture today, talking about our work as architects, also as planners, thinking about what is the city that we, let's say, would like to live in, and how on different scales can we work on it, on the scale of a single building, on the scale of a series of buildings, and on the scale as a neighborhood or a district. And to me, what this shows is that the city has apparently not become very important. It's more about the individual unit, individual house. Making a modern apartment seemed to be more important than, let's say, the question in which city I'm living, because I don't even know whether this is Seoul or Busan or any of the other Korean cities, and I think that's an important notion, because city planning, and forgive me, this is an image from China, but it could have been anywhere else. City planning, when you start a project, you often start with this, and when we get a project, whether it's an urban planning project or just an architectural project, this is how cities are being planned. It's urbanization, and it's not designed. This is engineered, and everything is expressed in numbers and quantities, and the architect's job then starts only within the footprint of one of those plots. That's what we have to. That's what we are confronted with every day. Guidelines designed by engineers. Now, the cities are basically planned on these three principles: car traffic, car mobility, which, as we know, is changing a lot. The value of real estate, which is changing a lot, and also designing for a final condition. And that's basically also a question, because cities should, of course, continue to develop, and a lot of these developments are not really meant for redevelopment. Now, this is again an image of China showing the credit crisis, the crisis real estate developers. It happened in just in the end of COVID. There were a few. Evergrande was one of the first ones, the big ones that collapsed. And what it means is that the value of real estate, all of these developments have been made on the assumption that the value of real estate will grow and grow and grow, and suddenly it collapses. And suddenly that means that the whole foundation for these urban expansions is gone. And what you now see, that a lot of these areas are not being developed, not being finished, and are unable to adapt to a new situation. A lot of people has lost their money, but also has lost their faith in in the economy. And I will come back to that later at the very end, because I think if you just catch a little bit the scenarios of Korea, and you see the demographic changes that are happening, you also see that it's imminent that there will be a crisis like this coming in Korea about the value of the real estate here. Another important subject is, when you talk about cities, is also about the changes from generation to generation, and going also to demographics, the composition of how people live in cities, where A lot of it has been based for decades and decades on families. It's no longer, let's say, family driven, or it shouldn't be, because people live in different ways, have different expectations of how they want to live, and also in what type of city they want to live. Now, I showed you the master plan with all these colorful spots, and I showed you the image of a Korean city, and they have one thing in common. It's all based on this topology of a tower. And the tower seems to be the only answer available here, but in so many other places, when it comes down to developing new cities and also redeveloping cities, urban regeneration. And the tower is a very interesting element. It's the simplest thing you can design. Anybody can design a tower. You only need to design one floor plan, and you just do it times 20, 30, 40. You have an entrance, and maybe you have something on top of the roof. But then you have a tower. And at the same time, it's the most difficult thing to design, because designing a good tower, designing a tower that actually is able to create value for a city and let's say interact with the city, that is not so easy. And I will show you some examples that we have been working on, and it's up to you to decide whether it's successful or not. But this is an example of a tower, and I will show you more later. And some projects are, let's say, simpler than other, and this is a relative simple project. It's the project, the most recent completion in our office, just 2-3 months ago. It's in China, in Xiamen, and it's a headquarter. So it's 100% office, private, not public. And Xiamen is this island city south of China, close to Taiwan, that used to be very hilly, beautiful, with fishing villages at the perimeter. But in the past 2-3 decades, the urbanization has basically taken over the whole island. 85% is now urbanized, and basically means that all these kind of hills are literally flattened and bulldozered, and then the city comes. And this is our site. This was the first time we came to the site. So the CBD is kind of coming up from all sides. The hill is completely flattened, and there is a little bit of hill left. And that's only because the military is there, and nobody is allowed to touch them. There were not many buildings here, but we know buildings are coming, and this was our site. It's super generic, and the client was also not having a very exciting brief. Just wanted to have office space, not much more. So, what do? The urban regulations, this is what you get always. You get this colorful map, and then you get this, and it basically dictates exactly what you have to do, because there's not much imagination possible. There is a podium, pre-described heights, setbacks from the streets, and then you have the tower with additional setbacks. And within that range, you can play a little bit, and that's not a whole lot. So how to develop something that goes beyond a podium and a tower? I mean, and again, it's a simple project. We tried many things, but at the end of the day, the client just said, I want just a large facade so people can see my building from far away. That's the only thing he was interested in. We were interested in basically telling a story also of, let's say, the history of the city. And the history was very beautiful landscape topography that basically got eaten up by the city. So we try to create a hybrid between a podium and a tower, which basically celebrates this topography, and it's basically a reconstruction of the topography that was there. And you see this almost solid-like sculpture that kind of combines. That's a hybrid of artificial topography and the pure tower in its purest form. Now, this area, Fujian, there is this local traditional architecture. This is like Minnan style. And they have these kind of very interesting windows. It's sometimes a solid piece of stone, and then they chisel out these openings. And we kind of like that kind of opacity, this very kind of rigid, monumental, monolithic look. So we decided to take that as a way to develop the building, but then make a kind of interpretation which is more contemporary. So that explains also this this facade system, very formal at the top, but gradually becoming more informal and following the height lines. Then these units are quite big. They're like 80 by 80 centimeters. And the company, it's the headquarters for a company that produces bathroom appliances. So literally from toilets and sinks and very high tech. It's almost like computer. But their basis was in making ceramic. So we asked them to produce their own facade and cast ceramic U-shaped elements with this kind of slightly reflective surface. So we could use this on the exterior of the facade, and inside those tubes we could put structure, MAP, but also natural ventilation. So you see all these units, but inside we have included a lot of the surfaces, so we could really liberate the insides of the building. So this is how this looks. Also interesting is it's a very shallow building. It's 20 meters wide only. And that means with 20 meters, there's not enough space for core in the center, which is nice. So we could put the core on the two sides. It means that every floor is one huge open space. Facades on two sides, so there is view and to the ocean, but also to the rest of the city. So in a way, a very simple building, but still trying to, let's say, try to make a bit more meaningful design from an otherwise very ordinary office tower. And this is how landscape and building meet. So that's our first project. Now, the second project, and I will show 3 in a row, they're all really starting from the same. A new CBD, a typical master plan, and a typical tower as a brief. Now, this is Hangzhou. Hangzhou is a very different city. It's in the Yangtze River, not so far from Shanghai, and this is where a lot of the tech companies come from. Alibaba is from Hangzhou, DeepSeek is from Hangzhou, and the national government has also developed a series of Silicon Valleys for China, and this is one of these Silicon Valleys. It's an enormous area, almost 30 kilometers long, with only tech companies and residential areas for those who work there. And in the center of this area, there is that white zone, which is the core, and inside that core, there is our project. And our project is basically following, again, the guidelines. So again, we have this kind of one plot with 3 subplots, and 1 tall tower and 2 smaller tower. That's given. That's maximum. That's also minimum, basically. Our client is a residential developer. They don't have a lot of experience with mixed-use buildings, and their plan was to make a tall tower very special and sell the small 2 towers because they are not so impressive. They don't look so tall. Now, who's going to live there? Well, the people that were living there, we imagined, were the young professionals, the people that come out of university, that start to work at these tech companies. And the culture in those tech companies is very competitive. People make long days, you really have to show yourself. So a lot of young people without any social life ending up working all day, tired at the end of the day, go home, next day, same over and over again. So, of course, they need an apartment to stay, but we thought if we make a residential project for these young professionals, let's then make a place where they also can meet other people, where they can socialize, basically where they feel at home. A bit of a 3-dimensional village rather than just an office tower. The client was asking for something like this, but with the client we discussed, like, why don't we see if we can create other typologies where we combine 2 towers into one, or where we combine the 3 towers into one. But that's challenging the regulations. But we had a very good client, and they said, we understand that this may be the simplest, but not the best solution. So after meeting the authorities a few times, we then decided, or we were allowed to basically proceed with a topology where there would be 1 tower separate, which the client said, okay, we're going to sell that one. And then instead we keep the 2 low towers. That's the project that we want to invest in. And this is just a diagram, basically 2 towers, which we link together with bridges. So it looks like 1 volume, but in itself, it's 2 different structures. And then we're going to cut off these edges, because on one side we have a Chinese garden park, which exists, and on the other side they're building a new high-speed railway station, kind of a large monumental building, so that the building also has some orientations into the kind of more interesting areas. And then we're adding lots of balconies. We like outdoor space. We like apartments that have outdoor space, private space, but we also have very large-scale public outdoor space. So we carve out the volume in the center, and that will be exterior space that we bring in. Not only exterior space to stay, but this is also part of a local network. So we literally pull the city into the center of the building. Then initially it was all about residential, but gradually the client started to see, like, well, actually this becomes really a bit of a 3-dimensional village or city, so we can also mix. And this is something with different types of apartments, but today we haven't opened the building, it's still being completed, but today we will complete it. When it's completed, it will have 2 hotels, it will have apartments, it will have offices, and there will also be facilities for startups. So it's going to be really a mixed-use project. The nice thing about this is that the plans are different on each floor. So the lower level is super straight, just 2 bars, but gradually these kind of corners starts to kink, and then at the end of the day you have these diagonal lines. So every floor is different, every floor is unique, and there's always that relation between the central atrium and the exterior spaces. Now these are the balconies I was talking about. These are very large units. They're 4.8 meters tall, so it's tall enough to make a mezzanine. I mean, it's what they call loft. It's a bit like an office tel in Korea. And this is when you turn around the corner. So you see the open space here in the center. There's kind of bridges, but there's no facades. So we can pull in the park, and we can also pull in the commercial streets, which runs right through the building. No cars, but still public access. So the idea of the outdoor space was to make a continuation of that Chinese garden space. So it can be used in different ways. People can simply, when it's outside too wet or too hot, seek shelter inside. But it's used for, already now, for small-scale events like fashion shows, but also people play badminton in the evening because there's not so much wind. There will be terraces because there will be some small restaurants, cafes, and so on. So this is how the space looks inside. Actually, it's very bright. Daylight comes in from the 2 main sides, but very light, colorful, and slightly reflective materials. And acoustically, it's also very, very pleasant. What is green are all common spaces. So throughout the building, here, but also the box there, are spaces that can be used for the people that live here, but also for the hotel operator or for other events. So it's a place where, different encounters can happen, different events can happen. And we see this as a kind of lively continuation of the city, not a building with a front door entrance and let's say a clear separation between public and private. Now, we're increasing in scale. This is a project in Shenzhen. It was a competition that we won in, I think, 2018. and it's located in the new CBD of Shenzhen. Shenzhen is there on the right side, and this Shanghai Bay is the new CBD for this whole Pearl River Delta. And this should be almost the kind of the final step of Shenzhen's development. The building is located right here, really at the crossing of two main axes. One axis is connecting the mountain to the water, and the other one is connecting basically all the neighborhoods that are located around Shanghai Bay. Now, this is an image I showed you already before. This is what the urban guidelines prescribe: podiums and towers. And they wanted this project to become a landmark representing the let's say the urban design of Shanghai, of the area. And the urban design was defined as a three-dimensional vertical city, which is mixed use, which includes a lot of public space, and to really celebrate a true new kind of urban culture. Now, when you look at this, I don't see very three-dimensional nor a very new urban culture. I just see podium towers, which exist everywhere, and nothing new. So, but okay, it's a commercial developer. I mean, they don't want to make things too complicated. So they gave us like, don't do any crazy shit. Just make it simple and elegant. Yeah, and that was the brief we got. So if you look at Shenzhen, what is interesting about Shenzhen, it's a city with a relative short lifespan. I mean, it's only exists since 40 years. But it's the city with most towers in the world taller than 200 meters. So these are some of the towers 200 meters and taller. And ours is 270. And what you also know, Shenzhen is the city of innovation in China. There's no city in the world that has more patents every year than Shenzhen. So it's the city of innovation. Now, when you look at the tower designs in Shenzhen, there is not a lot of innovation, really. I mean, you see the repetitive extrusion of a single floor plan, and that's about it. So if we do a project in Shenzhen, then it should also say something about its culture. It should relate to its culture. And we took that idea of vertical city very literal. So this is part of the master plan. So if we turn it into a vertical city, then yeah, it should be a project that has mixed districts where people can also move up. It includes public spaces all the way. Now, if you do a mixed-use project, for instance, hotel, residential, your volume will be quite narrow. You need daylight from two sides. You cannot make very deep plans. If you do office, it needs to have 1,500, 2,000 square meters. You have a core in the center. I mean, that's an office. And if you have commercial spaces, you need much larger floor plans. So what then typically happens is that each volume has its own program, and that's what you get. And we try to use it in a different way. So rather than thinking in volumes, we thought in bands and zones, each around 13 meter wide. And a multiple of bands also allow a certain hybrid condition between two different programs. So one band is residential hotel, but it still works with two, but it could also already become a little bit of an office. Office works 2, 3, 4, 5 also, and then you get the hybrid to commercial. So we were thinking of a plan that is kind of more flexible to also allow changes over time, and also to introduce different hybrid conditions. So when you translate that band system, you create plans like this, which can be different on various floors. The location is right in the center of this area called Mawan, and is located along these two axes. And one axis from the mountain to the bay is the X where all the towers are located. So the tallest towers are along this axis. The other X connects a series of distinct neighborhoods. In China, often neighborhoods are clustered according a certain theme, being whatever financial district or like. So a lot of these neighborhoods were in the same, let's say, in the perpendicular direction as the boulevard. So in order to make a building that relates also to its locality, this is the skyline of the future towers in this high-rise zone. So we thought we just make a very compact version of that, so that on our site it feels like the most intense moment of the high-rise zone. And in the other axis, you see these different neighborhoods, each with their own character. And we try to do the same. So what if we make a very condensed, intensified compression of these neighborhoods? Then we get a kind of character like this. And with these bands, what it allows us to do also is to really relate to the surroundings. On one side, we had these kind of green neighborhoods. So this Silk Road corridor, which is low, which has small scale pavilions, pedestrian oriented. On the other side, we had highways, elevated highways, a lot of noise. So also in terms of massing, we can address this in different ways, stepping down gradually, more open character versus a more formal site. And if you then translate that into facades, then this was during the competition, the scheme that we showed. Building that has 4 very distinct different faces, addressing also the context. The other part was the circulation. It's a TOD, means people come from underground, people come with buses, people come from the neighboring plots through above ground bridges. And our 3 plots are all connected, and also connected on all these multiple levels. We also wanted to make people kind of really go to the top, really make that feeling of reaching the top of the city. So that's not a private but a public space. So this was the rendering of the competition. Now after the competition, we went through many changes with the government and political and less political changes. So we had to make some adjustments. Basically, big adjustment was to make this massing here, but also work on the facades. In the end of the day, the concept of colors is very, very difficult because every color has a meaning. And then there's always opinions. So in the end, we changed it for kind of a material range that is from kind of more brights, let's say yellowish to deeper reds, and by doing so and by playing with depths, we create a very diverse series of facades that look like this. So these are all still, let's say, going up. So that was the 3rd tower. That's I think it takes another year and a half to finish. Now another project I wanted to show you is in Berlin, and it's not a tower, but nevertheless it's an interesting building that tells a lot about the city, and also not only about the city but also the culture of the company, the industry, and a lot more. So why I want to present this building? Because it's a building that has many layers. And when buildings have multiple layers and layers relate to certain aspects, buildings become only more interesting. Yeah? And I'll try to present this project now in the next 10 minutes in 3 different ways to you. So every time it's a different narrative, but they're all true. Now I start with the story about the company and basically the whole business of media. And this image is the existing headquarters, which was built in the 60s. It's a newspaper company at the time, media. This is where they were printing the newspapers. This is where the management was and the journalists. So a very formal building. Now, the company, we did the competition in 2011. The company was in a transition. They made their money with print, with magazines, newspapers. You see, 2008, the revenue was 350 million euros, and only a small percentage, less than 10%, was digital. But during the competition, which was here, the two really started to flip. The digital became bigger and bigger, and the paper less and less. And the CEO already had, expected this to happen. So what he wanted was a building that would become the new campus for their company, where digital and print would be, let's say, equally important. So it's a building for a culture change, or actually a company change, because by the end of the competition, it was already 50-50. So this is an image of, well, it's from the 50s or 60s. Old-fashioned journalists, men smoking cigars or pipes and typing on a typewriter the news article for the next day. That was media, and this is media today. And the thing is, they have both in their company. They still have this very German conservative departments, but they also have these, and they're investing in these startups that are in the basements of some of these Berlin areas. But they want to create an environment where both feel at home, and also where both feel part of this company culture. This is the CEO, Döpfner. So he was the one. He was a very interesting client. So he really pushed us. So he said, on the one hand, we want something. We want Silicon Valley. We want to be cool, but at the same time, we are also very conservative German. So give us something of both. Now, what is Silicon Valley? Well, Silicon Valley is this. Silicon Valley is Silicon Valley because it was never designed. It happened because there were so few limitations. It was simply because the culture of Silicon Valley, allowed all these companies to develop and innovate and experiment. But we took that Silicon Valley very serious. So if you want a valley, you get a valley. So we designed a valley like this, yeah? And then 2 times, so we folded it upside down. So now they have a lower valley and an upper valley. That is obvious, but the reason we did it is because this building is not for one company, it's for 40 different companies, small companies, larger companies, some of them more management, other ones are these kind of startups. And if you create a space like this, then you also create a space that allows the different companies to work in a single space, and at least have or share a physical space and have visual, if not physical, connections between those companies. So you at least are aware of all these different cultures around you that happen. And we designed the atrium not as a space to drink coffee, but it's a space that should really boost creativity. And this is something we use more often in projects, just to demonstrate that when you want a company to innovate, it won't happen behind a desk. It won't happen in a meeting room either. It will happen in all the other places, sometimes in the shower in the morning, but also on corridors, on the roof terrace, the coffee machine, in more kind of dynamic, open places. So our project is, on the one hand, the typical workspace, but also making space for these, let's say, different, for workspaces that are about communicating. So this is what's happening here, and in let's say in the solid parts, we have more the typical workspaces, the cell offices, the meeting rooms. So the atrium is the center of the project, and this is how you see how these different companies work. Well, this photo is old. This was during COVID, just after the opening. There were not many people, but We designed also the furniture, and companies can use it as they want. They can just put their desks there. They can also have their meeting places, their study places, their workout places, and so on. But what you now see, and that was the nice thing about COVID, there was a lot of home working, obviously. But when people came to the office, when it was opened, nobody used the cell office or the meeting rooms. They all went to kind of work in this space, because I think that's also the important thing about COVID. Why we need offices, why we need spaces, that is to communicate and have this physical interaction. And that does not happen in your cell office. That happens in spaces that are more engaging. We designed this space according to the same standards as the typical traditional German office, according to the DIN norms. Means that the daylight, the ventilation, but also the acoustics are as good as you design a conventional office. And I think that's a surprising thing when you walk here, and of course the slide doesn't show, but the acoustics are super pleasant. It's like you sit outside somewhere in a park, you can talk, phone, without hearing noise of other people. And I think that's a kind of very interesting aspect that unfortunately is difficult to present in this slide. So this is interesting space because you get all these different views from different floors and different corners in the building. You always feel engaged and surrounded by colleagues and strangers. Yes. So that's the first narrative. Yeah, the transition of a economy, of a industry, a company. The second perspective is from a historical perspective, and then we start with this map. This is Berlin in the Cold War. You see the barbed wire. This is West Berlin, an island in East Berlin, and this is the wall. And you see the red dot, and that's our site. So we had for us as architects, perfect location because it has a lot of history, and it starts with this man. This is Axel Springer, the founder of the company, who lived already during the World War II, and after World War II, he was, never again such an authoritarian regime. He was the spokesman of free press. He was anti every system. Yeah. So free press was very, very important, and he was very, let's call it, critical against the neighbors in East Germany. So what he did, his first headquarters is this gold-colored building that he built next to East Germany. Yeah, and gold, you could say, is the most kind of capitalist color we have. So it was a clear statement against the socialist republic next door. As a response, the East Germans built some apartment blocks right next to it so that East Germans couldn't see this building from the streets. And also not from the television tower, which is in the center of Berlin. So it was already a kind of a political battle. But you also see here this empty zone. And this empty zone is the wall zone. And with a wall, you always think about this part, this concrete wall. But actually the wall zone is a very open zone with various fences, minefields, and everything else. And so it's an open scar in the city. And this has been there for decades. But what happened, and this is the overlay of our building and the site. But what happened is that when the wall fell in 1989, the city of Berlin has been systematically trying to erase this from the cityscape, and basically reconstruct traditional Berlin architecture in all these plots that were affected by this wall. So it's basically repairing the city, but also erasing some of this uncomfortable history and past. But we had the opportunity to do something, and what we tried to do is where this kind of empty land, this kind of void in the city because of the wall was being erased, our plan was to basically bring it back and make these voids a kind of permanent object in the city. So the wall, the physical wall, was literally running from these 2 points right through the center of the building. So it's a monument to, well, the era of the Cold War. And this is how it fits in the cityscape now. So on the left side, you see the golden building, which is the original headquarter, and then the black one is the new one. Well, so if you take it very literal, you see the two sides, the green flooring, the black columns, but also the gold details at the facades is the capitalist West. And then the Aussies, the Ost-Germans, they have this very neutral palette of gray tones, very, very East German, I would say. We try to do that also with other details like furniture. So there's this Mies van der Rohe, the Barcelona chair, which of course also, yeah, beautiful chair, but the East Germans had an equivalence, which is maybe even nicer. Yeah, this is Rudolf Horn. So on the east side, we use this, and on the west side, we use this. So try to tell a story, a narrative of Berlin through architecture, through furniture, through colors, and so on. So we have East and West, and it's all about news, this company. We also have top and bottom, the two valleys. And in the center, we have one element that connects all four quadrants, and that's the news bridge, the newsroom. And that's, in a way, kind of the most symbolic thing we could think of, because the news, which is literally the raw news that comes in through all the channels, is being collected here in this space, and that's the pure news before any of these media companies start using it for their products. Because all the news, whatever broadcast company you look at, is doing something with the news. It's kind of making an interpretation, making it political, making it left or right, coloring it. But let's say the most neutral material is collected in this newsroom, and that is where East and West, top and bottom, are united. And this is the newsroom, and it's the only physical connection between these four different quadrants. Television studio is also included in there. So that's the historical perspective in relation to, let's say, Germany, Axel Springer, Berlin, and the wall. Now we also have another perspective, which is from a kind of architectural perspective. The history is not only bad in Germany. There's also very kind of interesting, positive moments we wanted to highlight. One of the memorable competitions in Berlin was 100 years, exactly 100 years before we did this project, which was the first skyscraper in Europe, designed by, well, this entry was designed by Mies van der Rohe. And that was before Germany was turning into this fascist country. It's the first skyscraper, so curtain wall, elevators, steel structure, multiple floors. That's the basic definition of a skyscraper. And he made this kind of beautiful renderings with charcoal, and these are the plans. And the project didn't get built, but again, it's like literally 2 blocks away from our site, exactly 100 years ago. And we wanted to honor this also as part of the history of Berlin, of this location. And what we did in the competition already, we took this image, this charcoal image with these kind of lines, and we projected it on the facades as a way to control solar heat gain. So it's a frit that helps us to reduce the solar heat gain, but also to create this kind of patina of the past as a kind of shadow of 100 years ago. And we combined it with black glass. Black glass because the black glass would really unite this shape as a solid block. Berlin's buildings are very, very consistent in height, but also all very monumental and heavy. We wanted to make a glass building, but make it look very Berlinesque. So these were tests that we made, different frits, different colors, different densities, and we tried to find a balance between making it legible, readable enough, and at the same time, from the inside, something that would not really affect too much the view. Client was very worried about seeing it also from the inside. So this was the result, and depending on the sun, sometimes you see it very well, sometimes very visible. Other moments, it disappears. So this is basically inside out, very much depending on the sun. So with less sun, the black building basically starts to appear more. So that's the story about the facades of the main volumes. And in the competition, the atrium was a very important element. We only expressed it in model without having any facades. We left that for later. So when we started the schematic design, we had to develop a facade for this whole atrium space that looks very transparent, or at least something that reflects very much this very dynamic energy inside the atrium. Something that also has a big contrast to the, let's say, main volumes, the black volumes. Something that's not heavy. But it's 34-meter tall space, and 34-meter tall space with a glass facade would basically mean you would have 1.5 meter deep columns behind the glass facade. Makes the glass facade a lot less transparent. So we worked with Arab's team on a structural principle that was based on having a very thin structure, but shaping the structure in such a way that it becomes rigid, like these air crates. This is paper, but if you fold it, it becomes rigid. And we did the same with steel. So we have a three-dimensional structure that is has kind of relative thin steel members, but by pushing the nodes in and out, you create a three-dimensional structure that is a lot more rigid. And by doing so, we save a lot of steel, which is not only good for the costs, but of course also it becomes a lot more transparent. So these were the renderings that we made. So planar view shows it as a series of flat triangles, but actually from a side, you see how it folds in and out. Larger span, deeper. Where the span is less, it moves less in and out. So this is how it looked after the completion. And also from the outside, the facets, the way they reflect the light on the glass, and it makes it very sparkling and energetic. Sometimes elements are very transparent, sometimes they're very reflective, but it does exactly what we wanted to do, create contrast and also create this kind of energetic feeling that the other facade doesn't have. These are some of the images, how it appears in the city and how it relates to the different buildings. So gold details in relation to the old existing headquarter. So from Berlin we go back to Seoul. This is a project in Gwangyo. You may have seen it. It's a department store for Galleria, and it was completed during COVID. So we didn't see it until, let's say, much later, until after COVID. And it's also a story about what is the relation with the city. And this is like the first project I showed in China, a new town. There is basically, we were designing a building without knowing exactly the context of the project. Our first site visit was this. We just saw the land and there was the lake, beautiful, and there was not much existing. But when you design a department store like this, it's also part of this commercial zone. This should be the place, the kind of most public space in town. This should be the place where people go to spend their free time, have food, do some shopping or hang out. but somehow the plan did not really, let's say, inspire that much, the kind of urban plan. So this is a little bit later when the surrounding buildings were under construction, but it shows the sites. But when we saw the plans for the surrounding residential towers, we like, this all looks the same. It all looks like it's built in cardboard, and if it's not going to last very long. So how can we create still an interesting, let's say, create a natural center in this area that is surrounded by so many, very generic residential buildings. They may be good buildings, but it doesn't really create city or a sense of a center of a city, at least. So we had quite a few ideas and plans, but in the end, we proposed this to the clients, and the idea was like, if we see the city as something that kind of gradually grows, expands around the kind of the core of a city center, then let's simply design first the core. We design something that seems to be a building that has always been there for hundreds of years, and we translated it into the idea of creating this giant block of natural stone. You know, kind of the genesis of Guangzhou, the very beginning. This is the core, the epicenter of Guangzhou, basically. So that's one story. So it's partly just a cube, and that's a cube because the CEO of the company wanted to have the most simple building without any voids, without any strange shapes, because he just wanted to have the most efficient building. 3 keywords: efficiency, efficiency, efficiency. That was literally the brief. Then we presented this at some point to the board and the CEO, and then the chairman joined, and he was, or the son of the chairman, he was new in the company, and he was like, why are we always building the same things? Why is OMA doing a department store as that we already have? And we're like, well, it was the brief. But we actually also had a second story, and we had not presented that yet. That's namely, we carve out a part of the stone, and that becomes an extension of the city, of the sidewalk. The sidewalk at the entrance, we basically pull in and we wrap around the whole building so that people can, without having to shop, you go up and go to the floors with F&B, the cinema, but also the cultural center or the rooftop park. It's a way for people to just basically extend the city into the building and also allow retail to have, let's say, more, let's say, alternative ways of retail, little pop-ups, little events that can be planned there, that will all happen, let's say, on the street. And although this is very small portion in terms of area of the building, it's less than 10%, and that is more than 90%, this still is very important for the, let's say, identity of the project, and also of, in this case, of the brand. So the result was this, a project which sometimes looks like a very big piece of stone that was always there, but sometimes also almost disappears, because, and I think quite often we are very ambiguous about what we're doing. We also wanted to make it really blend into the cityscape. So we designed the facades as a, call it urban camouflage. We took the colors of the surrounding buildings and the nature, and we literally kind of took the Pantone colors that we could find, and created this camouflage effect that, with a little bit of trees in front of it in the surrounding buildings, it kind of completely, perfectly blends into the surrounding cityscape. So it depends from what perspective you look at the building. Here it's obviously very present, but this is also the busy junction of the 2 main roads. And here you see the facade, how it is also created. It's all these little triangles of 14 different types of stone, natural stone. Yeah, and when we picked the colors, we also used this site model, and we took all these stone samples from our supplier, and we tested them, and we tested colors, patterns, details, and afterwards, this was together with the client. Afterwards, we reconstructed, let's say, a kind of preferred stone. So this was a kind of Photoshop of the ideal stone, and then we translated it into these triangular pixels, and then identified 14 different types of stone, all granites from different places in the world, with different qualities. Some very pale, very light colored, some very bold and very strong, and especially on the base, we have the kind of more richer stone types. So here you see the overlay again of all these different little pixels that together form this kind of pattern, this image. And also we treated them differently. So some of them are polished, other ones are buffed. So also the reflection of the sun plays a role. The plans are very simple. I mean, it's a square plan in the center, and then there's a ring around it with all the circulation, the back of house, the shop-in-shops, exactly as the CEO wanted. And then there's escalators in the center, almost no void. But the nice thing about this route is that in every floor there is one moment where it touches, one moment where it affects the floor plan, and also one, and that's for male visitors, very important, one moment where you can escape from this kind of shopping and this retail. So this is that route from the main entrance going up. There's a series of special moments that can be used for events, but also this moment where you actually get out of the volume and where you are suspended in front of the stone space. When you look up, you see the VIP space on the top levels. That's here. And what's also special, and that's a very nice thing about working in Korea, is that you have these contractors that are really, really good. In many places in the world, well, basically everywhere, you have to draw details very, very carefully before you tender it out. And once it's tendered out, the contractor will do everything they can to make it as simple and cheap as possible. Yeah. In Korea, we experienced the opposite. So the tender documentation is not very, let's say, developed per se, technically, but then the contractor takes it and proposes different ways to build it. And if you look, for instance, at these different nodes, well, we, in our enthusiasm, designed this whole loop without ever looking at standardization. So we figured out that every connection was unique in all its directions. So when we had suggested maybe we should look at a way to simplify the amount of connections and reduce it to maybe 20 different connections, the contractor said, no, don't worry, we will take care of it. We will just 3D print everything in steel, all these nodes, and then connect it with tubes in the other direction. And I think there's hardly any country in the world where a contractor proposes a solution like that. So we were very happy with that. The next project is a campus in Hongik. It's a very special project because I think it's a project that relates to a lot of our interests in our company. And I think the way to explain this project is not as an architectural project, but as an urban project, a landscape project, public space project, interior project perhaps, and at the end as an architectural project. So it's the new campus, it's this whole building. The Hongik University is a U shape wrapping around it on a hill, and Hongdae neighborhood is on the lower ends. And when we started this competition, which was an international competition, the first page usually asked for a landmark. And we all know what a landmark is, because it could be anything as long as it's different and looks, looks special. So that's, yeah, that doesn't really help a lot. And then we read the whole brief, and then we also found that when you read the brief, it doesn't talk much about architecture. It talks about campus, town, Hongdae, city, streets, city. So it's using way more urban words than architectural words. And it also says something about the spatial manifestation of the Hongik identity. Okay, now it's interesting. So what is the spatial manifestation of the Hongik identity? I had never visited Hongik, so there's only one way to find out, is to go there. So during the first week of the competition, we went there with the team. That's with Ken, and this is Im. Im had studied in Hongik. That was very good. So we spent here almost a full week living nearby in a hotel and spending time there, walking up and down, talking to students, to professors, to everybody who wanted to talk to us, taking many pictures, and also really try to absorb the culture of Hongik. We labeled it urban informalism. It's more urban, it's extremely informal, because you see outdoor, indoor, they are just so connected, intertwined. Ground floor levels don't, well, every floor has another ground floor level. The nature invades architecture. Art students take over buildings, but also all the courtyards are being used. In other places, the science students do it. In other words, it's blurring the boundaries between faculties, between inside, outside, heights, green, nature, built, urban, architecture. That's why that is what is special about it. And apparently it does generate a certain creative culture because of the compactness of this campus. And Hongik campus is very different from your campus here, which is beautiful, green, lush, has different qualities. It has at least one nice building nearby. But here the kind of compactness, this kind of urban quality, is something that we took as a start. So I think that we should not just do a nice standalone building, it should relate to it. The other observation is that our site was the only open space available in this whole area. And this open space was now a pitch, but it used to be a kind of natural extension of Hongdae. But over the past years, they had decided to build new buildings at this perimeter and created a boundary between the campus and the neighborhoods. Well, historically, the two have developed in parallel at the same time. And also, I mean, that kind of relation between the city and the academia, I think it would be way more sympathetic if they would have a much stronger combination, relation. So if we would just build a building on that site of currently 150,000 square meters, it would really become an obstacle between the neighborhoods and the university. So the first thing we did is to push it down and push it on the ground, and actually to have the roof slope so that you could actually recreate the natural topography of the Wow Mountain and create a connection to the Wow Park from the lower streets. The other thing is that we introduced what we call the Hongdae level. And the Hongdae level is the floor which has all the public program. We see it more as an extension of the neighborhood than, let's say, the beginning of the university, rather than being part of the private space of the university. Also for the reason that we know that in the very near future, the amount of students will simply go down a lot. And that means also this building should also be available to be transformed, repurposed for other users in the future. And therefore undoing that boundary would already help. So Hongdae floor is the floor where city and university meets, and from where you can then enter all the other facilities. Now, looking at the plan of the campus. It's extremely compact, extremely dense. And we identified some of the key nodes. From there, you can actually access the buildings behind. And we identified potential new nodes. So if from Hongdae we create entrances here, then we could also connect Hongdae better with the different faculty buildings. So this is our master plan. And then we combined it with an underground ring of volume. This is the multi-purpose ring. It's exactly what it is. It can be anything. It can be classroom, laboratory, makerspace, offices for professors, anything. And then we have different zones for the labs, for the amenities, and for the maker valleys. And in the center, thinking about the, let's say, the character of Hongik. Hongik's specialty is art and architecture. And according to, let's say, the chairman, I think that should also become the philosophy of the creative thinking in the art-related program should become the philosophy for also the students in science, in law, and in all the other faculties. So we wanted to literally, in the morning when they come in, infuse them with art, create a very creative, let's say, moments in the morning when they pass through. And hopefully they kind of take that with them and bring that to their final destination. So art is the central program. And this is a section, the Hongdae floor. And from the Hongdae floor, you either take a few steps down or up. So it's always easy to not take the elevator, just take the stairs. And this is the place where you meet, where you also drink your coffee, where you have the auditoriums, where all the common spaces are located. So this is an axonometry, taking the top off. You see this. Library, museum, auditorium spaces, cafe, meeting places, but also strong relation between inside and outside. From everywhere you have points where you can access the courtyards, terraces, etc. And it's underneath the slope, so the slope goes up. It means also the ceiling kind of follows the topography. That means you have a lot of conditions with double or triple height spaces, a lot of spatial connections also with the program above. This is right at the entrance where we have the cafe, we have a little outdoor terrace. This is at the museum entrance. It will have its own public entrance. And this is, for instance, the Hongdae floor and how it's connected to the auditoriums. Yeah. So that's the that's the current state of the project, more or less. So what was most important for us is to kind of keep that openness in the center, to not fill it with a building, but make it a space for the people to meet, to access, to walk through, to enjoy. So the Wow Mountain Green, we're using the same trees, the same species that are already available, and literally move it down all the way to Hongdae. And then we have these different courtyards. This is a bit of an older image, but we still have those courtyards with these big seats. We have a theater, for instance, that can be opened towards these kind of big seats. We have an amphitheater here. From here, people can enter all these different programs, the labs, and so on. And we really hope also that the life from the Hongdae districts, all these street performances, all the kind of creativity will also trickle in to the campus at some moments during the day. So that was Seoul. Now we're moving to Busan. Yeah, Busan is good to us. So in the last year, we have been doing a few projects. The red dots are some of the projects. I will start with this one. This is Mipo Edge. It was the first project we did. It was a competition. HAEAHN Beach. This is, let's say, one end next to the tall towers there. It's a project, hotel, residential building, but also with community facilities. And We did the competition. We're still negotiating with the authorities, and we hope we still have a chance to build it. So it was like a nice way to enter Busan and to get to know Busan a little bit better. In the meantime, we have been doing a few other projects. One of them is the redevelopment of Gwangali Beach. There is this boulevard which will be redeveloped, and we have been designing a couple of public toilets, which is kind of very nice. I think the most public building you can do is a public toilet, no? So, but also some seating areas. So this side is facing the city, and this side is facing the beach. So to start to animate the boulevard here along Gwangali Beach. Also a very interesting competition that we did, and we didn't win, is this Pier 1 competition. Pier 1 is part of this redevelopment of the harbor, and it's only this zone. And this is an old warehouse from 1977. And it's about, on one hand, preserving this building, because it's the last building that is still left. But it's also talking about the legacy of this area. At the same time, it was creating an environment for startups, and that should happen in here, but also creating events and exhibition spaces here. Now, I'm not going to explain it because we didn't win, but what was interesting is that we then really started to investigate the past, the history of Pier 1. And Pier 1 was established by the Japanese. It was important for the connection to Japan, obviously, but it became also really, really important during the Korean War, because as Busan was the last part that was not occupied, it was also the place where a lot of refugees actually, fled to, and their boats arrived here at Pier 1. It was also the place where all the soldiers from abroad came to Korea. So Pier 1 again was the first step into the unoccupied Korea, and it has transformed over time so many times. Became a kind of a fish market, and it became a container terminal and everything else. But it was somehow for us the beginning of working also more with the history of Busan. Then at the same time, the government asked us for doing an exhibition, which we did recently, a few weeks ago. And they asked us to do an exhibition on master planning, because master planning, they said, is something that is very engineering focused. And they were interested to think about master planning for Busan in the future. And so thinking about what master plan would then be appropriate for Busan, we had to think a little bit and also look back, because most of all the master planning that we have been doing over the past decades are actually for building more city, building more residential, building more office, building more everything. Master planning is an industry, is a profession that is about creating more city. Now, situation in Busan and in most of Korea is the opposite. It's not about more, but it's about fewer. And if you think about what then is relevant for a city in Busan, then it's maybe not talking about numbers, about quantity, but about quality and about specific subjects that relate to this city that will, let's say, transform. So we selected a few projects that were kind of relevant, at least in our minds. But we also had this control room in the center. The control room was a summary of the little research that we've done at the time. And it was for us most revealing, for you probably all known, and maybe very boring if I present it, but I will do it anyway. So this is the unfolded poster in the center. It was 3.5 meter radius, and it shows the chronology of Busan's population growth starting after the Korean War, 1960, all the way to 2050, and yeah, that's here. And this is where we are today. And it shows a lot of an overlay of important urban developments, policies, events that relate to Busan. And what it also shows is the population growth, starting here with 1.1 million in 1960 and peaking here in 2000 with 3.7 million. And you see interesting relations between trends and economic growth in Korea. And then you see this 2001 peak, but you also see this kind of flat plateau. That's where not much happens. And it's basically the silence before the storm. And we are now one generation later. You see there has been a decrease of 500,000 in population in Busan, which is a lot, but I mean, it doesn't really show like a very, very steep trend yet. Let me see, next. Yeah, so I'm gonna skip this. I mean, this is, let's say, the growth. More important is this period where from a peak, it starts to go down gradually. But also this is an important line. We see yellow, which historically, this is kind of the population 18 to 34 years old, all of you. Yeah? And this is 60 people older than 60. And historically, there was a relation of, let's say, one older person to 3, 4 active people, productive people, you could say. And gradually over the years, until to 2020, they crossed. And that means after this, there will be more older people over 60 than people in your age, which together with the decline in population, of course, changes the society and everything radically. And that will have a huge impact. I think what we found especially interesting, maybe shocking, is that we looked into policies and how the government is responding to these trends. So we had these 2 walls at the beginning. One was observations, newspaper articles, and the other one, how does the government respond to it? And there's all incentives to keep people in Busan and work, let's say, for elderly homes and try to stimulate more babies. I don't know how, but it also didn't really work, I think. But what is missing, what we didn't find, was there is no plan for the city. There is no physical plan for how the city will deal with this. And we talk about master plan, and you imagine like a big model, how will city look that will gradually have fewer people and a different balance between young and old people. And I think that is what we were interested in, because that observation means that, well, probably it's a kind of topic that politicians don't like to talk about. Yeah, where is it going to end? I think this is the challenge for us, for you. I mean, we have sustainability as a huge problem. This is a more silent problem that inevitably is going to happen. So, what in the presentation to the local government when we opened this exhibition, it was all like, what you need to develop is, when you talk about city planning, master planning, is a strategy of pruning. You have to decide really where to invest in a city and where to not invest, and that those are painful decisions. But if you don't do that, everything is going to decline, and that's going to be even more painful. Now, at the same time, we were asked by the government to do another project, and it's related to what I just explained, but it's not the same. Here you see the central station in Busan. See the new opera, and you see 2 spots, Anchang and Yeongju. And what they have in common is that they are all located on slopes on a hill. Yeah? And that's a very Busan thing. And these slopes, they contain these houses. They were built during the Korean War, and afterwards, initially probably as temporary housing. for all these refugees that came to Busan. But gradually they were formalized. And now they look like this, and they are all over Busan, and they're very colorful, and they look very happy, and very nice little streets, and nice places to visit as a tourist. But the sad reality is that they are no longer occupied a lot. I mean, this area, Yeongju, was about 20% is empty, but Anchang is 80% empty. And that means that apparently there is no future for such areas. I think what is important to mention is that these really are part of the city. This is city. This is where people live. This is where social cohesion is, or maybe once was. There is a relation with the topography. There is a relation with the history. It's part of the identity of a city. And if you say, I'm from Busan, then you have this in your mind. Now, what's happening is that urban redevelopment is happening. And you see these towers in the back. That's basically where decisions were taken by previous owners to give up the informal settlements and to build new residences and sell their lands. And that is something that's going to happen now everywhere. And the government is very worried because exactly this will be the result if there are no alternatives. Because the residents who are owner of the land, they are allowed to do this. There's an FAR, there's these kind of guidelines, and if you stay within it, there will be these towers that will just replace this unique landscape. Now, this is understandable. These are apartments that have a better quality. You can park your car there. In the other slopes, you cannot have a car even. And these are modern apartments, but it's not a city. This is not, there's no relation to anything Busan stands for, but let's say where maybe the tower apartments once were the ideal situation to live. Currently, with the demographic changes, we also see that it's no longer the families that form the core of these neighborhoods. You have many more singles, you have elderly. Perhaps there will be a future for multi-generational housing. So when you redevelop these residential areas, you have to also think in more variety, in different lifestyles. And different people also have different ideas about how they want to live, in what type of city they want to live. Because yes, they may want to have a modern apartment, but maybe we can do it in a place that feels much more unique and bespoke and relates to the locality of the place. So we looked at these two areas, Yeongju and Anchang. It's not a final master plan. It's a study. Yeah, it's a project for discussion. That is what we try to do. Now, the local residents already started redevelopment, and these are the plans that were developed together with their local partners. And that's the moment where the city said, we need some, let's say, objective party to do a proposal so that we can show that there's alternatives, but they must be comparable. They must have the same amount of square meters, the same amount of units. They should park their car. So let's say the total areas and units should be the same, but it should become a project that relates to Busan much more than this. I will just do a very brief presentation, but we as there's many different people and lifestyles and family compositions, there's also many housing typologies. And the problem in Korea is that the tower is very dominant. That's culturally the case. We've talked to many people and they all basically say, yeah, that's the tower, basically a tower apartment is what is considered the modern residential unit. But also the legislation is extremely focused on towers. In the way the urban guidelines are defined, the setbacks, distances between buildings, regulations on fire, everything is logical from a point of view of a tower. If you try other typologies, suddenly it does not always seem very logical. So we tested a bunch of typologies. In the end, we decided to do 3 alternative typologies to the tower. So 4 in total, just to test how far can we develop these typologies so they still, let's say, work, and where does it work and where doesn't it work. So these 4, I will only explain one, otherwise it takes too long. But this is, for instance, the urban villa, which is, I think, a very interesting typology. It's a 4, 5, 6-story tall building with a central staircase and then 2 to 4 units on one floor plan. The interesting thing is it has 4 front facades, and these 4 front facades all face a public space. So you have a very strong relation with the topography, with the streetscape, with the green spaces around your buildings. So we did a parametric study for all the typologies, and we tested a lot of different parameters. This is only a snapshot. So we test different grids following the height lines or going reverse. Different heights means also different distances to the blocks, but also different footprints. The colors relate to the sun hours. So which orientation works with the sun, which one not. We tested the views. We tested how well it works with the topography. And then we identified these different, or we kind of assessed the success. So a lot of them, where it doesn't work, it was red, yellow, perhaps. So we try to optimize it. And sometimes it was green. And that means then we get close to the brief, to the density that we need. So high density, low rise. But also according to the regulations, always very important. So we did that for both sides, for all typologies, a few hundred studies for each. And then this is the summary, basically. So we identified where in the area a certain typology works and where it doesn't work. So here in a more flat area, the urban villa works. On the steeper ones, much less. Also not in the ones that are north-facing slopes, doesn't get enough sun. So there's a lot of reasons why sometimes it works well and sometimes it doesn't work. Anchang, the same. Here in the center, it works well. And we basically did that for all 4 typologies and then created this collage. Row housing, urban villas, towers, terrace housing. The same for the other 2. So it's its approach. It's not a final design, but by doing this, we have typologies that relate well to the surroundings, and also it ends up in the right volume, at least the same amount as the typical tower. Then we tested the 2 sites. We first did analysis, also what are the characteristics, what are the connections, what are the problems that we are facing, and then we analyzed also the available social structures, the schools, the churches, the bus stops. So if you look at the neighborhood, you should also look at the surrounding neighborhoods, and then, like with Hongik, identifying basically what are important nodes to connect, so that people can, from the lowest to the tallest part, like go from the area with most schools to another place with schools, and so on. So this is a bit the rough start of a master plan. And if you overlay that with the plan use that was given by the authorities, where the roads have to be, where we can't build because of tunnels, and then our typologies, then this is more or less the pattern where we create these clusters of typologies. And then this is then a few steps further. This is a direction of how this master plan could look. Urban villas here, a road typology there, towers in the back, and terrace housing here. There is a color scheme, there is a facade scheme, but best way is to simply kind of see how it looks. So this urban villa type is a very informal way to kind of work with the slope. We have a lot of, let's say, amenities, whether it's a daycare or it's convenience stores in the base. Important to say is that all the, let's say, streetscape is liberated from parking. Cars can drive there, but not park there. So that means that most of the area is really 100% for pedestrians and can therefore also be used for all kinds of nice public space designs, being a playground or having simply a tree or a little terrace, and so on. So places that actually stimulates a sense of neighborhoods. Now, from these urban villas and a lot of these places, there is kind of still nice views over the harbor. These are the terrace housing and the towers. And we also looked at these connections, how you can connect one neighborhood to the other one, where we introduce commercial streets here with escalators to make it easy for people from the lowest end to go to the monorail on the top. Some of them are more green. So it's a whole diversity of public and spaces in there. And then this is the image that you get at the end. It's of course not the same. It's not a preservation project of the existing houses, but it's a neighborhood that somehow is an interpretation of the informality and of the current condition, the way it follows the slope. It provides an infrastructure for a different social community than I think with towers, which, as said, are very, very, let's say, anti-urban in many ways. Now, in Anchang, we did basically the same, just as a proof that this methodology can be applied to multiple areas. And these are now slopes in Busan, but let's say after next week, we'll also present this to the Gangnam area, because urban regeneration is something that happens in many places, and it's somehow, it relates to topography, but it does not need to relate to topography. It's also a system that we can further develop and introduce other typologies, other ideas. We had a discussion earlier that preservation could also be integrated as part of the master plan. So in that way, it's more thinking about an alternative approach, showing that, yeah, it's possible, and something that hopefully leads to a lot of discussion amongst different resident organizations and local governments. And I think we've come to the last slide. Yep. So with that, I came to the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you for having nice lecture, and you guys may have some questions. So if you have question, raise your hand so we can have the answer. So 질문 있으면은 손 들어 주시면은 좀 받겠습니다.
I saw lots of OMS projects use a methodology that cutting off from the boxes. It seems like it's not growing or like formed from zero. It is cut off from the boxes. Always it's like a square shape. So is there a reason why you use that methodology to make a mass of buildings or other projects?
Are you referring to the last project mainly? Hold on, where is the the Berlin project? Well, I mean, we as a company, we think that we don't really have a very consistent style like other offices have, but for sure there are relations between projects, both in formal style and language. So yeah, we're working a lot with geometrical volumes that we manipulate for various reasons. I mean, yeah, Galleria is a cube that we manipulated. And you saw at the Busan study also a lot of cubes, of course. And in Busan, it's something that's because it's a sorry, this is very slow. Because it's a let's say a rough massing study, something that can be redeveloped in many other ways. Yeah, so I mean, these are the kind of cubes that we are sometimes chopping off parts, but here it's very necessary, because there we need to create space for a fire truck vehicle to pass through. So there we just follow exactly the width and the height that is necessary for a fire truck vehicle, while the rest of the volume we optimize the available area to create a floor area. But I mean, yeah, we like to work with pure shapes. I mean, if you look at the TPAC theater, it's a cube, and there's a series of volumes attached to it. I mean, it's something that's yeah, it's a kind of combination sometimes of kind of a functional approach, but also formally interesting to create this juxtaposition of different shapes that work together. So, yeah. Do you disagree with using?
I'm just curious about
Curious.
why by using that pure geometry to start.
To start, well, yeah. Also, it depends per project. We're also doing very shapy and organic projects also sometimes, but that's not the majority of the projects. That's true. Yeah, I mean, we can discuss endlessly about the power of the cube and in the rectangle, but maybe yeah, we need more time for that.
Thank you for the lecture, and I want to ask you a question. I'm always like curious about the urban planning and the architecture relationship between those two. And usually when we like build architect, there is some more complex problems in urban planning. So I always think that only making a good architecture can solve those kinds of problems. But in like as you showed before, the Busan, it has been decreasing population since 2020. So like when you build those kind of houses, how do you think that those kinds of houses can affect to the like urban city to Busan? I like Busan. Mm, how do you think that the architecture can affect to the city in Busan? Yeah.
Well, I think the Busan project is not about architecture. It's about the kind of the master plan, huh? And I think what is if you look at the current situation where we have these sloped hill housing, you see that people have a strong relation with the sites, with the surroundings. They all have access to streets. They all live on a slope. They all, I think, let's say, know their neighbors in their streets. It's really a kind of a social community, a neighborhood, places like that. And I think that is the aspect that we try to, let's say, take as a start for these new areas. If you know, or if you just look at the numbers and you see there is this kind of aging society. I mean, Korea is the first super aged country in the world. I just read yesterday that China also officially is an aged society in 75 of the percent of their provinces. And this is going to happen everywhere. And I think why Korea is interesting now also is because it's soonest. It's happening already now, where in other countries there is a bit of delay perhaps. But if you see how many people grow or how many older people you have in a society, and you think of the support it needs in terms of healthcare and elderly care later, and how few young people you have against it, then it becomes quite scary in a way. Like you have to build a hospital next to every residential building almost to kind of compensate it. There will not be enough doctors and nurses and everything for that. I mean, it won't work. So it's very scary. And then in Korea, especially, well, let's say immigration is a kind of difficult subject, where in other countries, that actually is why a country like Holland is still not in decline, is because we have immigration. Yeah? Canada is like the best example in the world. it thrives on immigration. And so basically they have the same issue, but they delay it. Now, I think one thing is that if you imagine that older people, that's another thing, a lot of them are lonely. They are isolated, and older people have more difficulties in establishing connections, new connections, and creating a kind of social network. So when people don't have a social network, they completely rely on the system of hospitals and elderly care. If you create areas where social systems are, let's say, supported, then the first line of defense would be there with your neighbor, with the people in your block. And that's why project like this will only work when it's really inclusive, when you have elderly people living with younger people, living with families, with the singles, and not make only elderly homes. They will happen, elderly homes. I mean, we're talking to developers that will make really these enclaves for elderly, which is fine. But I think if you cannot afford it, or if you don't want it and you want to stay independent as long as possible, it would be great if you live in an area where you do have a different social system, social network. Now, I don't know how you live, but I lived in a tower for a while, and I must say I didn't know any of my neighbors. You go into an elevator, you don't talk, and you go out, and that's about it. And that's why I say, like, towers, for some reason, are unable to generate a sense of community. And I really believe that places where you have that public space in between buildings, where you have many entrances on the ground floor, where you see people come, where you have the little cafe for the local people and the restaurant, that will be a way to mitigate. It's not the only way, it's not the solution. I was in Holland. We have had an experiment in student cities where there's a shortage of student housing, where elderly homes were opening up their system. So there was a mixture of students and elderly, and that is good for student houses, but it was also good for the old people, because they had these shared kitchens where they started cooking for each other. One evening, a student's cooking, whatever, a student pasta, and the next day, one of these older people that have plenty time, so they cook for 12 people, and it has really created a lot of new energy for both. And I think these are small examples, but if you would think of this on a larger scale, I think you would create attractive places in cities where people want to live, not only when they're old, but also, feel like ownership of your own city, and not just be a resident in an apartment. And I think that is the, let's say, the idea behind this, and it can be translated in many other ways. Doesn't need to be cubes. So this is showing that there's other ways possible than towers. We have nothing against towers, but maybe not everybody wants to live in such a neighborhood.
First of all, thank you for your lecture. And as a variation to the first question about OMA's style, I feel like you have a system rather than a fixed style. And I wanted to know if my interpretation was close to your design process or workflow. That was the most curious part, I think.
Well, when we start a project, we usually look at many different shapes, options. If you come to our office and you see the start of a competition, there's sometimes 50 models in blue foam. We still do blue foam, by the way, on the tables, a side model, and one is circular, the other one is square, the other one is a series of smaller volumes. Sometimes it's a campus structure. So we're testing many ways. That's kind of part of our methodology. And cubes are often part of that methodology too. So indeed, we do test certain, let's say, recipes as parts of the design process. I think that's indeed true. But we also try to always try opposite ends as well. And I think we somehow we like also to make projects that kind of do not look overly complex or overly complicated. Starting with complexity is usually never a very good beginning of a project. We are very good at making simple projects very complex, by the way. So a simple cube can be extremely complex also, but we like to make projects, like say, legible, so you can read how it responds to certain things. It's always important to create a sense of hierarchy in a project. What is the kind of the main idea in a project? What is the main volume, and what responds to whatever site or direction? So that's something that indeed you will recognize in many projects if you see it. And maybe that explains why a cube is kind of always a very good starting point. But yeah, we try not to repeat ourselves, but obviously you do use methods that we've tested in other projects as well. That's inevitable.
Thank you.
Okay, here's another, like maybe the final question.
Well, thank you for the astonishing presentation. As Mr. Rem Collis said, the OMA or his architecture is kind of deep hesitation, not a manifesto. But well, the new era begins, and
You have to speak in the microphone, otherwise you have to really put it in front of your mouth.
so as the Rem Collis, as his architecture has been a deep hesitation, not a manifesto. But now the new era begins, and I think the OMA has been renewed. So, is there any common philosophy shared by OMA now, currently?
OMA exists 50 years and was founded by 4 partners. And currently we're with 7 partners. And there have been all kinds of periods in between. OMA isn't one thing, it's for sure not one person. And I think the great thing about our office being a partnership and not rely on one person, and although Rem has been the spokesperson for many years when our office was much smaller and had a different setup, is that we're able to adapt. We're able to adapt with new people, working in new areas, bringing in new influences. And the last thing we want to do is have one philosophy, or you say manifesto. I mean, when Rem writes that, he writes it. It's his product of what he has been doing it, but it's not something that is forms another chapter in a certain Bible that everybody is following. I mean, we are very much also able to change our opinion when we see that it's necessary. I mean, ambiguity is also a beautiful thing in project. You can sometimes have multiple interpretations about it. What I tried to share today was the fact that when we design a building, we always, okay, maybe that already sounds too absolute, but I generally, and with me most of the people, think of the building as a small part of a city, not as a building on its own. So it relates to its surroundings. If you talk about quotes, somebody once said, "Fuck context." Yeah, that's in another manifest. And these things started to lead their own life. And I think the person who, and I've been confronted with that many times, "Oh, you guys, how can you present this? You always say fuck context." No. Then read the whole text and you basically see that this is not our quote, it's an observation. And it's an observation that is something that we see and we do something with it. And our projects are the response. No, what we try to do in every project is to do something that has not been done before. Simply something, let's say, the best possible project for that location, and that can be about doing nothing to redeveloping or developing an entirely new typology that has not been done before, as far as we know. Not for the purpose of doing something strange, but simply because we believe that, it's interesting to keep on developing architecture and try to test new ideas. So when we start a project in the office, it's the most interesting moment of a project. I mean, our teams are like hungry dogs. They're like, yes, let's start, let's do something. And the first days, the first weeks are like, we do test as many things as we can. That's why we like doing what we do. That's the driver, that's the motivation. And we don't have in our office, let's say, special projects and let's say standard projects that pay the bill. I mean, we decide to do the project because we see there is potential in the project, and otherwise you get teams that are doing the special projects and people that do the non-special projects. That wouldn't work. That wouldn't be motivating. So every project is an opportunity to do something as good as possible for that project, for that client, for that city, for that context. That's how we start every project. And I think the nice thing is that over all those years, although the company has expanded, and when I started there were 35 people, we are now 350 people. So I think that spirit is still there. Although the company became more professional in many other ways, obviously, and the scale of project has changed. But that spirit we try to keep. We have a very horizontal organization in teams. I mean, if we work with a team and let's say we have 6 people, we have associates who are working in our office for 10, 20 years, and we have juniors and interns. But we discuss projects on the table like you do in a studio. Just bring in idea, and it's an open discussion. And yes, somebody decides, but the discussion is about what is the most interesting observation, solution, idea, and maybe we can develop that in some way. So I think that is what is the basis of every project. Not so much a philosophy or a manifest or some written piece. It's we don't read that much in the office. We just make things.
Thank you.
Thank you for your lecture and also the answer about the question. And for me, it was very nice. And then see the project, your project in Hongdae, because I was one of the person who write the brief. I was one of the person, but not about the landmark, but about the Hongdae. And I was also, I was born in Busan, and I was the one who left Busan from that period. So it was very meaningful to me to check your project around. And thank you again for your lecture, fantastic lecture, and please give the applause. Yeah.